Welcome to Joint Session Diverse Voices in New York State Cannabis, the podcast where policymakers, legislators, thought leaders, licensees, and advocates come to discuss the evolving landscape of cannabis in New York and beyond. I'm Herb Barbot, former Director of Operations at New York's Office of Cannabis Management. Each episode, we bring you in-depth conversations with key voices shaping policy, business, and advocacy, plus expert insights on the latest developments impacting the industry. And now for the episode. Welcome to episode 20 of season 2 of Joint Session. This is Herb Barbot. In this episode, we'll speak with Joshua Tepperberg, the Mediblist, a self-described medicinal chef, and his take on cooking with cannabis. But first, as always, let's take a spin around this week's news. The U.S. Senate voted on Tuesday to confirm Terrence Cole as the new head of the Drug Enforcement Administration. During a nomination hearing in April, Cole said that the cannabis rescheduling process would be a first priority. However, he did not state whether he believes cannabis should be rescheduled. The rescheduling process has been stalled since the change in federal administration. A rescheduling hearing was set to begin on January 21, but DEA Chief Administrative Law Judge John Mulrooney put it on hold following a push by a group of rescheduling advocates to have the DEA removed from the process due to alleged bias. On the campaign trail, President Donald Trump voiced support for rescheduling, but surprise, surprise, has not said anything about the issue since the election. The National Cannabis Industry Association sent a letter to Cole on Tuesday to spotlight Trump's support and to urge Cole to resume the rescheduling process. We strongly encourage your office to continue advancing the cannabis rescheduling process in a timely and transparent manner, wrote CEO Aaron Smith. We respectfully urge your administration to recognize the importance of collaboration with stakeholders who can offer real-world insights into the public health, enforcement, and operational impacts of federal cannabis policy. Also on Tuesday, anti-legalization group Smart Approaches to Marijuana called on Cole to reject rescheduling. We have fought alongside state and federal allies who believe the original move to reschedule marijuana was politically motivated. It's time to reject politics and follow the best data we have. Those show there's no reason to move marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, the organization's president, Kevin Sabet, said in a statement. Meanwhile, Trump allies and advisors like Matt Gaetz and Roger Stone are pushing to rally support for rescheduling. So I can't believe I'm saying this, but good luck, Matt and Roger. In California, Cresco, a publicly traded multi-state cannabis company, announced early last week that its strategic restructuring plan includes selling its California operations, which includes growing, processing, and distribution. The company will hold on to its Floral Cal brand, it said. Capital is increasingly precious in this environment, and our focus is on deploying it where it earns the strongest return, said CEO Charlie Bachtell in the announcement. While California is the largest cannabis market in the world, the structural challenges, ranging from fragmented retail to price compression and the illicit market, combined with our lack of scale footprint in the state, make it extremely difficult to generate sustainable profitability. Exiting California allows us to reallocate capital and resources to our core markets and build out new markets where we see clear pathways for growth and shareholder value. In Texas, the Senate State Affairs Committee held a hearing to discuss and advance the first hemp bill to see a vote during the special session that started last week. The bill, Senate Bill 5, is basically the same bill to ban intoxicating hemp products that Governor Greg Abbott vetoed last month, and is sponsored by the same lawmaker, Senator Charles Perry. Feels a little like Groundhog Day, Perry said at the start of his explanation of the legislation, which he said is intended to effectively regulate/remove some of the products that are currently on the market. Perry covered some of the confusion over what the 2018 Farm Bill allowed when it legalized hemp, as well as false narratives that have been created by the industry to make you believe that any product that derives from the hemp legal plant has to be ultimately legal. In a word, if you get high from the product, it is illegal. That's plain and simple, Perry said. Hemp has become a multi-billion-dollar industry in Texas, but Perry pushed back on claims that the bill would lead to job loss. He also pushed back on concerns about access to therapeutic products and encouraged people to participate in the state's medical cannabis program. Governor Abbott called on lawmakers to pass a bill to regulate not ban intoxicating hemp products during a special session, which will run for 30 days. Governor Abbott's veto in June led to a public backlash from Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Patrick held a press conference after the veto during which he suggested Abbott change positions due to outside pressure, rejected Abbott's reasoning, and called him a supporter of full legalization, which he is not, at least not publicly. In reading the proclamation, one can only come to this conclusion, which surprises me. The governor of the state of Texas wants to legalize recreational marijuana in Texas, Patrick said. While some news outlets reported yesterday that Abbott now wants a full ban, Abbott's spokesperson told the Texas Tribune that adults should be able to access heavily regulated, non-intoxicating levels of hemp, and there should be strict legal enforcement of hemp that exceeds 3.0 milligrams total THC per serving. In New York, the Cannabis Control Board held its July meeting late last week. Please note there will be no meeting in August. While the board approved 52 new adult use licenses, bringing the state's total to 1,851 across the supply chain, staff for the Office of Cannabis Management disclosed that the expected date of the last store opening from what is called the December queue, and those are applicants who apply for retail and microbusiness licenses in December of 2023, would be sometime in the spring of 2033. That's quite the wait. I hope to speak with a few applicants in that December queue in an upcoming episode. Thank you to Cannabis Wire for the news. Check out Cannabis Wire at cannabiswire.com. Our guest today is Joshua Tepperberg, known as the Mediblist, a word I was unfamiliar with. Joshua is an executive chef and co-founder of Work and Roll Events, NYC. Chef Joshua believes in the philosophy that food is medicine. As a self-described medicinal chef, Chef Joshua provides healthy food that is delicious and medicinal. Welcome, Chef.
Thanks, Herb. Thanks for having me.
All right, I felt like I was on the bear there saying chef. How are you?
Good. Chef is a title that I don't even always like to call myself. I consider myself just a fancy cook.
Well, to me, a fancy cook is a chef. First of all, what is the Mediblist? What does the word mean?
Okay, so the Mediblist is it's a play on words. When thinking of how to position myself in the industry, I came up with or actually my wife came up with the concept of I was doing medicated edibles. And so to a lot of people, the word medible was being kicked around. So as somebody who was making medibles, I kind of found that kind of mixing in my culinary perspective, I was doing things a little more with direct focus and intention of the food I was making. And I jokingly one day said, well, I'm the ist of, I'm the best, I'm the est of of edibles right now, the way my focus is, and Mediblist, came out as, like scientist or some other practitioner of the art. So for me, Mediblist became the moniker I started being called. At the in the scene at the time, people are asking you, so what do you call it? What's your name? What are you known as? And it was like, oh well, I'm the Mediblist. I make the best in medicated edibles. So.
Right, but how did you first enter the cannabis culinary space?
So, I mean, first entering cannabis culinary space was, college, just making, hot brownies back in the day, and a lot of thanks being given to, Chef Ra. If anybody listening is familiar with Chef Ra, he used to do the recipes and food section of High Times magazine back in the 80s and 90s. And, Rasta pasta and all these types of dishes that Chef Ra put out there back then became kind of standards in the cannabis scene back then. And as I developed as a chef, separately from developing cannabis chefing skills, I found that some of my culinary clients every now and then would jokingly be like, hey, can you happen to be able to make pot brownies? And I saw that it was becoming a thing outside of just the people that I knew that were, cancer patients or terminal patients that needed a product like that for themselves or, for their actual medicine. So I realized I was good at making the stuff, and um, my techniques coming from the chef world, I seem to be able to produce a consistent product.
Well, that was actually my next question is when cooking with cannabis, how do you ensure that consistent dosing, and how does that impact what you do?
When I'm making the preparations to ensure the consistency, I've been working with the same supplier for a while and trying to use street math. We have a basic formula where if the assumed cannabinoids are 15 to 20%, we would say on our high end that for 1 gram of flour, we have about 200 milligrams of THC. And um, from there, the way I was taught it, that there's an absorption rate that if you put 200 milligrams of THC into the oil itself isn't going to actually absorb all 200 milligrams. The oil is going to absorb, say, depending on your actual fat medium and the molecular structure of the fat that you're dealing with. Butter can absorb maybe 50% of the THC, where coconut oil and sesame oil can go as high as 80 or 80+%. So I would typically try to keep my fat source in mind, and then if I'm infusing into an olive oil or a coconut oil or a sesame oil, I'd be assuming, olive oil actually to me is about 70% coconut, a little higher, sesame to be the highest. So if I'm going into a sesame oil, then I would take an 80% calculation of that 200 milligrams, and I would put that as my working dosage for the total amount. And then again, divide by ounces or by tablespoons, depending on what I'm then putting it in.
Can you walk us through your creative process when you're developing a new cannabis infused product or dish?
Um, yeah. So when I'm creating a new product or dish, I first start with basic flavor profiling. And the truth is the terpene profile of the flower doesn't really transfer over into
Mm.
the edibles when it's being processed. The decarboxylation and a lot of other processes kind of diminish the terpene profile. So I'm not really trying to pair the terpene with the food. It's really more of pairing the herbal essence of the extract. I have found that you have to kind of almost do a taste test and try different strengths first, because like if you're using, so it also depends if I'm infusing these days with butter or with RSO, it infuses differently and the flavor is different. The RSO is so strong that
Mhm.
I gravitate towards more earthy, flavorful things. And to be very honest, my RSO concoctions outside of chocolate, most of my RSO stuff is much more safe.
And what is RSO?
Yeah, when I use Ari Rick Simpson's oil, uh,
Okay.
when I it's really considered the first medicine in cannabis. It's been used for a lot of epilepsy and other neurological disorders. It fights, certain types of cancer and disease, at least to a cent, to a degree. Um, so the thing about RSO is it has a very dark flavor to it, very dark, very earthy. If you've ever had wheatgrass and you found wheatgrass to be hard to handle, this is like wheatgrass on steroids. Um, and to mix that into food can be a challenge. I've found that keeping things on the savory side when I'm working with RSO is actually a little better. It seems to play more into dishes that need a little bit of earthiness or umami. So instead of using as much of a mushroom stock or as much of a balsamic vinegar, I'll add in the RSO there to complement the flavors. And with regular edibles, the idea is to work on something that people are going to want to eat, that people are going to not consider to be medicine, and that they can add to their daily routines without it screwing up their diets. So, like personally, things like gummies, even vegan gummies, even non-GMO, vegan, cruelty-free, whatever labels you want to put on it, it's still a gummy. It's still primarily sugar-based. It's not really, in my mind, the healthiest way to deliver cannabinoid therapy. So, although I do make a chocolate with my stuff, I try to keep it low glycemic index and everything on the chocolate, if that makes sense, so that it's be considered healthier.
So beyond the psychoactive benefits, what flavor profiles or culinary benefits do you believe cannabis brings to food?
So besides the psychoactive, the benefits cannabis brings to food, and this is one of the reasons why I love working with cannabis, is more of the medicinal side of it. Um, yes, cannabis is recreational, but the recreational market was built on our medicinal background. Just my philosophy, thinking of our bodies as complex engineered mechanical machines. We need clean fuel sources. We need to be, we need to maintain our machines, and um, having cannabis mixed into your diet does certain things medicinally for you. It helps stimulate your endocannabinoid system, which a lot of people aren't even familiar with. Imagine having a system in your body like your lymphatic system that you completely ignored most of your life. Your body might develop over time, but it's not going to develop and work as smoothly as if all the systems were working. So charging that endocannabinoid system without having to smoke it or ingest it in quantities where it is more psychoactive, it helps give your body daily maintenance and helps regulate lots of other stuff. They've found that it's tied into blood pressure and tied into diabetes. All the systems in your body have to work together to keep your health up. And if one of the systems has been depleted forever, then your body's always been hurting. So mixing it in, even in small amounts, it's beneficial. It helps your digestion. There's been, if you're a sick patient, the research goes back to the AIDS patients that they weren't sure why it was helping them with their appetite, but you mix a little bit of the cannabis in, and it was actually settling their stomachs and acting like an anti-nausal medicine, and that made them able to eat more. So there are benefits to it other than just the fact that it gives you a buzz.
So how do you educate clients or diners who may be new to cannabis-infused cuisine?
So I educate the clients and the customers. I usually start off, if they're new to cannabis, with a basic explanation of how it affects the body, how, like, the whole endocannabinoid system, and how they don't need to use a lot of it to feel the positive effects of it. Having small amounts, like a microdose, I would say, like a 5 milligram edible in the morning, as opposed to their aspirin or something. I start off with it's not a cure-all to all your life's problems, but it can help alleviate certain daily conditions, and which, does lead to a better lifestyle and overall health. So I start with that, and then I go a little bit of how the digestion works, because a lot of people don't realize that there's basically 5 different reactions to ingesting cannabis, going from a little bit knocks you in your face and puts you out, to you can eat as much of it as you want and it doesn't really do anything for you. And so people have to understand that first, the dosing is variable for their body. The effect is variable for their body. 5 people can sit down at a dinner table, all eat the same dosage. Some feel it right away. Some never feel it. Some makes them fall asleep. So they have to understand that everybody's body reacts a little differently to it. And like a lot of medicines, if you're not suffering from a condition, you might not notice the benefit of it because it's not there. But the endocannabinoid system still needs to be recharged. So having it, you might not feel it, but if you do mix it into your daily use, you should notice an overall health improvement.
Yeah. So, how do you see the intersection of fine dining in New York with cannabis cuisine over the next few years?
So the the intersection of cannabis cuisine and fine dining has been a topic of conversation for a decade now, and at least. And the truth is, I don't personally see the industry moving towards sustainable high-end cuisine with cannabis use in it. I've been doing a lot of dinners. I've done a lot of dinners in my time, infused dinners and cannabis pairing dinners, and it seems to be a novelty for a lot of people to be able to go and have Italian food with infused olive oil, or I say that I used to make infused pizzas. So it was a very easy. Everybody's like, oh yeah, you just add it to the olive oil and you're good. And it's not that simple. But the higher end cuisines, like I've done omakase, and I'm actually my culinary instructor from Japan just hit me up. He's being flown to Thailand to do a cannabis infused dinner. And the concept is that we can elevate the meals, and a lot of chefs think that they can elevate the meal so much just by adding in that one ingredient. And because the ingredient itself is an intoxicant, it makes it hard. You have to go very low dose. It's really hard to get the terpene profiles into the food without having to use other botanical and food derived terpenes. So I personally see the intersection becoming more tasting and experiential things, where you're being guided more like a wine tasting, or even a food, wine and food pairings, where you're being shown the complexity of the herbs, because it really is a fine herb. It's the fact that the plant has the ability to take on so many different terpene profiles and all the different characteristics it makes it incredibly fun to play with in the kitchen. But that doesn't translate over to the intoxicating effect that some people expect from it. So ultimately, I see there being pairings where people are being given high-end, like amuse-bouche bites, and that being paired with a cannabis strain or cannabis product where there's an interaction between the two. I see it being used more as a finishing herb, something where ultimately the way I try to use it now is more of think of it as the chives that you sprinkle on top of the potato.
Well, can you share an example of an event that you hosted, a cannabis culinary event that you hosted that sort of demonstrates, exemplifies your philosophy? Yeah.
It's been a while, but there used to be an event series going around this New York City area called Taste Masters, and Taste Masters brought in a clientele of cannabis connoisseurs, and they would pair local farmers with just different, they would usually just do flower tastings. And so when I spoke to them, we did a a pairing where it was one flower brand, and they had flowers like, wedding cake and GMO, and I forget the other two flavors. But the challenge for me was to get a sample of their flower and then produce single bites that reflected the flavors and the terpenes of the flower. So the easiest one to do,
And the bites were infused themselves?
the bites the bites were actually not infused in this case, just because they were doing the flower tasting, and we wanted to make sure everybody had that. But the concept of this one was, for example, the GMO strain stands for garlic, mushrooms, and onions. So I made little focaccia bites that were, garlic, mushroom, and onion, using black garlic actually from Taproot Fields, which grows some amazing cannabis, but they also grow amazing garlic. So that was my tie-in. Was I was using produce from one of the state legal cultivators. Just because these guys are farmers. They don't just, some of them grow more than just cannabis. And for the wedding cake, that I served a little dessert bite. Something that was, I think it was a very orangey flavor. I forget which strain it was. And same thing, made a little, I think for that one, I did a ceviche with a heavy orange flavor to it. So, other events, like in the past, I used to produce more of an elegant dinner service, parties of, 10 to 20, price ranges, $100 to $200 a head. And dinner could be quirky, quirky entrees like chicken pot pie, which, always makes people giggle when they hear it, to, full omakase spreads. I think the last one I did that was considered more high-end was actually at the THC Museum before they closed. And we did an omakase night there. Maybe 20, 30 people came for dinner. We did 12 courses. And that was paired with a hash brand. And some of that, we had some bites that were infused and some bites that weren't infused. For example, when we did the seared tuna, the ponzu that we drizzled on that, we used an infused ponzu. And this way, we can control the amount that we're distributing on it.
Are there any misconceptions about cannabis cuisine that you'd like to try to dispel?
Yeah, misconception about cannabis cuisine. You don't need to eat a strong dose. Um, that's a lot of people think they need a heavy dose. They're new at. They're like, oh, I smoke a lot. I'm strong. I can handle it. And then, the last thing you want to do is be the person who overdid their edibles and passed out at the party and is sitting on the bench snoring. When I was doing the dinners, I had a lot of people ask me, well, I mean, for $100, what's my total THC going to be? Like, I don't want to, I can go buy edibles. I don't want to, like, what's going on? And I would tell them, well, the THC is actually free. You're paying $100 for the food. You might not actually, you might be somebody who doesn't get affected by edibles. And as the chef, that's not something I can account for. So the misconception is, you have to take a strong dose. And, I'm sure everybody's seen the memes where, you're like, oh, this edible is not going to do anything to me. And then 45 minutes later, you're naked in an empty swimming pool doing the backstroke.
Mm. Now, what advice would you have for any amateur cooks at home who want to experiment with cannabis cuisine?
Oh, advice for amateur cooks. Listen, guys, don't be scared of it. But don't go crazy either. Start slow, start low, start by trying to make an infused oil at first. If you are even an amateur chef, if you've ever tried to make any sort of infused oil, a basil infused oil or anything like that, just start there. I could give you guys a basic recipe. It's easy to just Google, how to make an infused oil these days. I would start with that. Get your understanding of the absorption rates and how much you really need to put in to get the strength out of it, and do a couple practice runs yourself. Take maybe an eighth of flour and make that into a batch of cookies, and see if how many cookies did you need to eat before you felt it, and remembering that you need to give yourself time to digest, and then absorb it into your system. So for home cooks, don't plan a big meal for a lot of people and experiment that way, because it can go wrong. You can make the oil too strong. There's lots of things you can do by accident. You can over decarboxylate it. You can under decarboxylate it. So practice, and at least once or twice practice a recipe. Like any other culinary thing. You never want to pull a recipe out of the air and give it to a client without it being tested at least once or twice. You want to make sure that you can do it. I wouldn't be scared of doing it. It's not hard. It's just, you need to be consistent, and you just need to be thoughtful of what you're doing. Give yourself a little notebook, maybe write down your notes and your little process. So when you do it the next time, you can add to your notes. I recommend that for anybody who's cooking anything. Keep a notebook, and, results, whether they're positive or negative. This way, next time you can always improve upon it.
Now we haven't talked about your other venture, Work and Roll Events NYC. You want to say a little bit about the work that you're doing there?
Sure. I'd love to say stuff about Work and Roll. So Work and Roll was originally founded by two others. I'm a co-founder of the Work and Roll events part of it, but Work and Roll originally was a co-working space in Chelsea. It quickly became a hub of New York City cannabis community activity. It actually was kind of hard to get your work done there, because so many people would come in and so many people would have so much to talk about in the industry that it ended up being more of a daily networking than actual co-working. We have a lot of brands in the New York City area that the partners met at Work and Roll. They had their original launch meetings and sessions at Work and Roll. So we are fairly well ingrained into the community. We didn't see the space that we were in being suitable for a regulated space. So so we moved out of our space, basically because we started throwing events maybe 2 years ago, and that became a larger focus of the brand. We found that the event series that we were doing, specifically our Bud Tender XP event, landed very well in the community, and there seemed to be a need for that type of event to be put on at the time. So, we outgrew our space, and we decided that we wanted to keep on maintaining the community. So now we actually throw every other month. We throw an event for bud tenders and community members of the licensed legal community. So if you're a legal brand or if you work in a licensed retailer, then we throw events and we market it directly to you guys. We don't really open it up to the public. Our events recently have had 400 or 500 bud tenders, as many as 600 attendees, maybe 15, 20 brands. We're pretty strict on our compliance of who comes. We try to run it as if though there were state regulations in position already for it. We work with venues that have ventilation systems and outdoor spaces and stuff to help keep us within at least the scope of what we're looking for. We found that there's a definite need for not just these events, but a level of hospitality and other industries that need to be brought in to the cannabis market to make it fully effective. So we, as a events and marketing company, we have some other endeavors that we're looking at doing. We've been part of some other larger conversations about how New York City is in a position to control the world's cannabis hospitality realm, and the direction of that is going to come out of New York. And we've, as an organization, we've thrown over 200 legal events, and we see that the future for cannabis consumption in mainstream society is there's going to be, like we all grew up on, Budweiser presents this concert, and there's that at some point it's going to be presented by a cannabis brand. And I work on events with a company called Legalized NYC, where we're doing live music and cannabis, and Work and Roll helps manage that. And we're looking at doing larger, bigger events that will eventually include the public. Once the regulations are out and we can open it up to the public.
So how can someone who's interested in attending either a Work and Roll event or soliciting the services of Chef Joshua find out more?
Well, you can always reach me, Chef Joshua, on Instagram. My handle is at the Mediblist, TheMedIblist. You can also always email Work and Roll at events@workandroll.nyc. You can always DM Work and Roll at workandroll.nyc on Instagram. I'm reachable also, the Mediblist at Gmail. I'm very open to people reaching out about questions. I do work professionally in the culinary area and as a consultant, but I also will gladly talk to anybody about recipes, infusing. To me, there's no gatekeeping on this.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knew how to cook and use cannabis at home. I don't see it affecting me in my business, so I actually prefer if everybody had this background and base on how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like anything else, cooking is a skill, a life skill that everybody should know, and definitely helps keep you healthier if you know what goes into food and what goes into preparation of food. So likewise, if you're into cannabis and into edibles, you should have an understanding of how it absorbs into your body, how it absorbs into the products, and just in general how it works.
All right. Well, thank you for your time today, Chef Joshua. It's been great speaking with you.
Hey, Herb, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. I appreciate being here.
That's it for this episode of Joint Session Diverse Voices in New York State Cannabis. If you found today's discussion valuable, consider leaving a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. It helps more listeners find the show. Better yet, share it with colleagues, advocates, and anyone interested in the future of cannabis in New York. Joint Session is produced by me, Herb Barbot, together with executive producer Robert Curtis from Simlev Media. Special thanks as always to Cannabis Wire. You can follow us on Instagram at jointsession.pod and on LinkedIn at Joint Session Podcast. If you have any comments, questions, or topic suggestions, reach out to me at herb.jointsession@gmail.com. Until next time, this is Herb Barbot. Thanks for listening.